I have a confession to make. As much anime as I've watched, I honestly haven't read a lot of manga. In fact, I've never finished a series. I've spent a lot of time reading many volumes of a manga, but never reading right to the end. Many years ago, when I watched Devilman Crybaby on Netflix, I felt inspired to change this by reading the entirety of Go Nagai's original manga masterpiece. So I bought the manga, read about half of it, and then forgot I owned it for about a year. And then I got back into it again, recently, and I read the entire manga from start to finish within a couple weeks. And after reading this manga, I've become very interested in it, and yet I've found that very few AniTubers have actually talked that much about the Devilman manga. They've mostly just covered anime adaptations. So I thought it would be interesting to make a comparison video between the original Devilman manga and the Devilman Crybaby anime adaptation. I think both versions of the Devilman story have things they each do well and things they do poorly. But which ultimately is the better version? Let's find out. Part 1. The Style. Go Nagai's original Devilman manga has some of the most breathtaking art I've ever seen in a manga. At the very beginning of Devilman, we are treated to these beautiful depictions of angels and demons battling each other on Earth ages before humans existed. The way the demons are drawn is incredible. The backgrounds are beautiful and detailed. I could see this art hanging in a museum and it wouldn't look out of place. Then you get to the rest of the manga and the art style feels totally different. The art style that we see our characters interacting in most of the time is much more simple. I wouldn't call it bad, but it doesn't feel quite as breathtaking as the beginning. However, if they made every page that detailed, they might not have ever been able to finish. The more common art style present in the manga is a very old-school cartoony look. The characters give off a strong, old-fashioned cartoon feel, as if they came out of a Popeye cartoon. It's definitely different, but I do enjoy it quite a bit. And the manga doesn't just stick to one of these styles. Some pages feel more detailed, some feel more simple, some look somewhere in between. The ones with more detail are used to great effect to emphasize the more intense moments of the story. I'd also like to say that regardless of art style, the demon designs always look really incredible. I'm always blown away by the designs of these demons in the manga. I will say that the art style shifts to make the story feel a little out of sync at times, as though two different artists had worked on this manga with very different ideas. But honestly, that's mostly a nitpick. Overall, I love the art in this manga. The Devilman Crybaby TV show, on the other hand, does feel much more consistent in its style. But that style is something that I have seen many conflicting opinions about online. Personally, yeah, I kinda love it. I'm not even really sure how to describe it, but it looks somehow ugly and amazing at the same time. Which is, funnily enough, probably also how I would describe the story, but we'll get to that later. The characters all have this kind of simple but cool look to them. The designs are really good, but also have this simple style, making it so they can be animated in exaggerated, fluid ways easily. It's perfect for the kind of series this is. Part 2. The characters. So before we discuss the different personalities and attitudes of the characters, I think one obvious elephant in the room that's going to strongly affect the way these characters are written needs to be addressed. Both versions of the Devilman story came out at completely different times. One of the things I actually love a lot more in retrospect about Masaaki Yuasa's Devilman Crybaby was that it knew how to take an old story and rewrite it in a way that fits with the modern times more. The character designs are more modern in the clothes that they wear and the way they talk, and even the use of phones and social media. Devilman Crybaby makes it feel like the events of Devilman could happen today. I would also say that some of the updated versions of the characters in Devilman Crybaby are a welcome change from the original Devilman manga as well. And I can't think of a better example of this than Miki. In Devilman Crybaby, we understand right away why Akira, our protagonist, cares so much about Miki. In both versions, she is a friend to Akira, and her family takes him in, allowing him to live with them while his parents are working abroad. However, the Crybaby version of Miki treats Akira with genuine kindness and understanding. She's one of the few people who seems to understand Akira best, and understands that the reason everyone considers Akira a crybaby is actually because of Akira's incredible empathy that causes him to cry when he hears about the misfortune of other people. She is also an independent character who is defined by her own feelings, struggles, and passions, such as her interest in track and field running. She doesn't feel like a character who exists for the sole purpose of giving Akira someone to protect. She's a strong, interesting character on her own, who you can understand and empathize with. I genuinely liked her character in Crybaby, and wanted to see her make it through all the terrible things she goes through in that show. Manga Miki, on the other hand, honestly not that strong of a character throughout the series. When we're introduced to her character, she quickly makes fun of Akira for being a crybaby, teases him about how he's not manly enough. When they encounter a group of incredibly 70s-looking goons, she puts both herself and Akira in danger to try and act tough, even when it's clear that Akira would rather avoid violence. She generally doesn't come off as a particularly likable character at the start, and there's very little about her character beyond the surface level. She has some good moments later on in the manga, so I'm not going to say she's a completely needless character, but it's hard as the reader to really get invested and understand why Akira cares about her as much as he does in the manga. That being said, there is a character that I actually think the manga handles much better for the most part, and that character is Ryo. Ryo is a very strange character in Devilman Crybaby. In both stories, he shows up while Miki and Akira are seemingly being harassed by goons. He pulls out a gun and it's just kinda like, yo Akira, come with me. The Crybaby version of Ryo explains everything about the possession and death of a professor he was working with, as well as the discovery of demons in the car before taking Akira to a rave, where he proceeds to stab people in order to summon demons. He never fully explains his plans to Akira, but in the story it's implied that he has always had this very unempathetic and detached mentality to basically every other living thing except for people he has a very close relationship with, such as Akira. Almost forgot to mention the important difference that the professor who gets possessed and dies in the manga is his father. Or at least he thinks it is. It's a bit confusing, I'll explain that later. But in the manga version, you sympathize with him and the crazy way he acts more because he went through something traumatic. His father was possessed by a demon, whereas it has less impact in the anime, because it's not his father, and he doesn't even really seem to care that much. In fact, the Crybaby version of Ryo is implied to be an orphan. He comes off so sociopathic and detached that it raises questions about why Akira and him even managed to become friends in the first place. And it also raises questions about why Ryo even seems to care so much about saving humanity. In the manga, his character makes much more sense, for the most part. The manga version of Ryo, while acting impulsively, does genuinely seem to care about saving humanity. Ryo never really harms people for no reason, at least not at the start of the manga. Even when he kills people at the rave, he seems to consider it a necessary evil rather than something he actively wants to do. Hey, this is CJ editing from the future. I just wanted to say that while it does come off as like a little bit more of like a necessary evil thing, I think this is largely because Ryo talks about this sort of beforehand with Akira, and he sort of makes his intentions like, hey, we're kind of gonna have to sacrifice these people for the good of like saving humanity. Like, it makes it come off as more of a necessary evil thing, and he sort of tries to justify that in the rave scene from Crybaby, but he doesn't really make his intentions as clear, and so that's why I think he comes off as kind of more sadistic and less understandable in the Crybaby series to me, but ultimately in both versions, I just kind of reread that part, and ultimately in both versions he comes off pretty fucked up still, but yeah, anyway, this might not have been as strong as a point as I thought it was when I originally put it in the video, but I thought it'd be weird if I didn't acknowledge that. Back to the video. Akira has a lot more reason to trust him. Even the impulsive side of his character is not said to be the way he always was. He has seemingly been changed by the discovery of demons and the death of his father. Of course, there is another reason he behaves the way he does in Devilman that is not explained till later in the story. In Devilman Crybaby, it is explained that Ryo has always secretly been Satan, and so he has secretly been plotting against humanity from the time he was born. In Crybaby, Satan has the power to reincarnate himself as a human, which is how he gained the identity of Ryo. But as an audience member watching Devilman Crybaby, him being a twist villain at the end doesn't really feel as surprising or distressing as it should due to his sociopathic behavior early on. Manga Ryo, however, is different. You see, the Ryo we follow in Go Nagai's Devilman manga is not even really Ryo. I mean, he uses the name for the most part in the series, but by the end of the manga, you find out that he stole that identity from another person. It's unclear if this Ryo is even the same Ryo that Akira originally became friends with. The demon known as Psycho Jenny, one of the most powerful psychic demons, used her powers to make all the humans believe that Satan Ryo was the same Ryo who existed before, including Satan himself. Everything that this Ryo does, he does because he genuinely believes he is human, and he genuinely wants to protect humanity from demons. Because of this, while he comes off a bit crazy at times, he feels a lot more sympathetic overall, making it a stronger gut punch when he discovers his own identity as Satan and betrays Akira and the rest of humanity near the end of the manga. Of course, both versions of Satan do genuinely care about Akira, and allowing Akira to gain Amon's powers to help him survive the apocalypse. However, the reason they care about each other and their general friendship is more believable in the manga. Whereas, in the Crybaby adaptation, I constantly found myself wondering why Ryo and Akira were even friends in the first place. The Goons. I'm just kind of grouping these characters up as the Goons, because that's how they're initially portrayed in both series. Both these groups of characters develop in their versions of the series into good guys who are meant to come off as more likable to the viewer by the end. In Go Nagai's manga, these dudes genuinely start off as pretty unlikable, as they just bully and threaten Miki and Akira for seemingly no good reason. That being said, I absolutely love how they're drawn in this very old-school cartoon goon way. These characters are honestly pretty simple throughout the story, and there really doesn't seem to be that much to say about them. The time in which they turn good is when Akira saves them from a spider demon attack. He prevents spider demons from taking full control of their minds, and they feel indebted to him for that. And they're seen later in the manga fighting alongside him and Miki. However, the crybaby versions of these characters are definitely my more preferred versions of these characters. These characters are never really all that bad. They never really threatened Miki or Akira. For the most part, they were kind of just rude to them when they first meet. They're also beatboxers and rappers who honestly sound great throughout the series. I love the way that the Devilman Crybaby anime incorporates their music into the themes and story. They're pretty likable characters, even right from the start. The anime also does a lot more with these characters. You see them get stereotyped as bad people based on the way they look and dress, even though they're actually just chill, creative dudes who just want to sing rap music. They have many short songs they sing throughout the series, and all of them tie in to what is happening in the series and the themes that the viewer is meant to think about while watching the series. They of course also befriend Miki and end up defending her later on in the series from the lynch mob that attacks her, much like in the manga. However, I also like how the individual members get a bit more to them in Crybaby. For example, how this character gets a crush and develops a friendship with Miko. Personally, I probably prefer the Crybaby versions of these characters to the manga versions. Part 3. The Story. Both the original manga and Crybaby anime adaptation have been called great by many people. It's certainly one of my favorite mangas, and it's also one of my favorite anime. But which one is the better version of the Devilman story? Well, I feel that the story in each version comes with its own pros and cons, but the major thing separating them is the way the story is paced. Of course, when it comes to the manga, the reader, to some extent, controls the pace, but the manga author can still choose how many pages should be dedicated to a specific event. Devilman Crybaby had to pack the entire story of this incredible manga into a short 10-episode series. I don't imagine that was an easy feat for the writers to do. That being said, because of this, there is hardly ever a dull moment in the series. Everything in Devilman Crybaby feels exciting. The problem, however, is that it also leads to certain moments feeling rushed. When something serious happens in the series, the viewer doesn't really have as much time to pause and take in the events that just occurred. This kind of lessens the emotional impact of the events in the anime that felt like they hit harder in the manga. For example, the Apocalypse arc, where demons begin a war with the humans near the end of the series, only has a few episodes dedicated to it in the anime. Whereas in the manga, it seems to go on for such a long time. It really feels like a long-lasting war is going on in the manga. The reader of the manga is left to contemplate as they read this arc about what characters might survive, what will become of the world, humanity, and society as a result of this war. Are demons really the biggest threat to humanity? Or is human nature its own worst enemy? Of course, in the anime, this and other arcs don't have as much time to sit, but they do at least have the advantage of music and action animation to boost their impact and intensity. Ultimately, both versions of the story do the arc well, but I'm still left feeling like the manga ultimately had a little more impact to it. However, the manga did still have its own story problems. Aside from some poor character writing, such as Miki, the manga has some arcs that are not in Crybaby and ultimately don't feel like they matter to the story. The main arc that I take issue with in the manga is the time travel arc. In the manga, Ryo and Akira have to travel through time to rescue historical figures from demons. This arc seems to show that many real and terrible events in the past were actually the cause of demon meddling, which I just don't really like that implication. Especially in a series which is heavily known for its themes regarding the flaws and darker sides of humanity. It feels ultimately kind of antithetical to the message of Devilman. Also, there is one point in this arc that bothers me particularly. At one point, they go back in time to Germany, and they meet an artist with a mustache who seems to have anti-Semitic tendencies, and yeah, you see where this is going. It's Hitler. They went back in time and met Hitler. The thing is, both Akira and Ryo don't seem to realize that it's Hitler, despite it being aggressively obvious. Like, Ryo is supposed to be really smart, and his dad is meant to be a professor. And yet, this manga expects me to believe that he has never had the most basic of history lessons. Also, this chapter has Jewish characters in it who are portrayed as large-nosed and greedy, which feels pretty uncomfortable. I genuinely don't think this was meant to come off in an anti-Semitic way. I think it's more to show how Hitler developed the awful and stereotyped ideas that he had in his head, which are obviously wrong. But, I don't know, it was still confusing, and it came off pretty uncomfortable when I was reading it personally. There are genuinely some things to like about the time travel arc. Okay, I just wanted to come back in and say that, like, I think I was a little too, almost went a little too easy on the Hitler part of the time travel arc. You see, the way that this arc is done, there's a few things about it. I don't even want to go into all of it. There's a few things about it that come off a little anti-Semitic. But like, it's not just that, it's also the fact that like Hitler is almost portrayed as like a sorta semi-sympathetic character in this arc. Like, you know, another character kind of fucks over his life, and when he gets possessed by a demon, and it's kind of implied like, oh, that's why Hitler went crazy or something, but it's like, you know, especially when we're talking about like a book where to me the main message I got out of it, like overall, was about how, you know, hatred is bad, and hatred among humanity is bad, and like Hitler is probably one of the best examples of the ways hatred can tear humanity apart. From real life history. Like, the things he did were very, very awful, obviously. You probably don't need me to tell you that. This part's unscripted, by the way. Yeah, so it feels pretty... This whole thing feels very weird, kind of anti-Semitic, and pretty out of place in the rest of the Devilman book. I don't know what the hell happened with this particular part of the time travel arc, but it was pretty bad. I did not like it. I didn't like it. It was very uncomfortable to read. And I'm kind of surprised more people haven't pointed out how weird this particular part of Devilman is. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Bye. There are genuinely some things to like about the time travel arc. The fights in it are really cool, and this arc also makes it clear that Ryo likes Akira in more than just a friendship way, but ultimately that could have been in the story somewhere else, and overall this arc feels pretty out of place. Part 4. The Themes. As for the themes and message of Devilman, both versions portray the message in their own way. You see, Devilman, while being about fighting demons, is also very much about the flaws in humanity. how easily we could come to distrust each other, and how that could be dangerous if we let it erode our empathy. In both versions of the story, humanity ultimately, unintentionally helps the demons by causing distrust to take them over, until humanity ends up killing each other instead of the demons. Mobs form, literally restarting witch hunts against humans, thought to be possessed even with flimsy or non-existent evidence. Heck, even the demons themselves are more human than Devilman might want to admit. They represent the irrational, dark, and animalistic side of humanity. They are prone to anger, lust, destruction. Humans have a bit of demon in us. In Devilman, it's also implied that demons might have a bit of human in them as well, as both versions of the story have the demon Kime give up their body in order to help Cyrene, showing that demons can also experience love. But that's as deep as I'm going into that. For a more detailed look at some of the themes of Devilman, mainly Devilman Crybaby, I highly recommend the video You Are a Devilman by Mika Sakas for more on these themes. While you can take many of the same themes and messages from both versions of the series, there is still a key difference between the two, and that is the way that Akira ultimately views humanity by the end of the series. Part 4. Optimism versus Pessimism. The story of Devilman to many people doesn't exactly come off as an incredibly optimistic one, but the endings of both each reflect a little differently to me. It could honestly just be the way I interpreted them, but please allow me to explain why. Near the end of Go Nagai's Devilman manga, Devilman sees what humanity has become in its terrified and paranoid state. He sees that Miki's parents, the people who took him in, had been tortured and killed just for associating with him. He starts losing faith in humanity, questioning if humanity is even worth saving. He ultimately loses his last bit of faith in humanity when he finds that Miki has been beheaded and killed in a witch hunt. He still battles Satan, but he is fighting only for revenge at that point, having completely given up his goal of protecting humanity. Masaaki Yuasa's Crybaby version of Akira has a similar arc near the end of Devilman Crybaby, but it's not quite the same. In Crybaby, Devilman discovers Miki's parents and younger brother, who have already left the house due to Miki's brother being possessed by a demon. He discovers them already dead, having been killed by government demon hunting squads. But this does not cause him to lose faith in humanity. Akira is frustrated by his failure to protect his family, something he later informs Miki about. When Miki later dies, it is painful for Akira, so much so that he does kill the humans who killed her in a fit of rage and sorrow. However, these are the only humans he ultimately ever kills in Devilman Crybaby. Ultimately, he still returns to fight Satan in order to protect humanity. The main difference being that in the manga, he is fighting only to get revenge for himself. However, in the anime, he keeps some faith in humanity, and he continues fighting for humanity.
I really don't want to fight with you. That's not a problem. I have enough desire for the both of us! Humans will never lose to demons like you. I will destroy you, each and every one of you!
This could be because of one scene that the anime has, which is not included in the original manga. It's a scene that seems controversial among fans, but I think it's a very important part of this version of Akira's development. It's a scene that really shows us who Akira is more than any other scene in the show. When Akira leaves to find Ryo after Ryo outs him in the anime, he instead comes across a group of humans who have other humans tied up and are stoning them to death. likely due to the distrust that Ryo had just stirred up in the world. Akira, despite being horrified by the scene, stands in front of the humans being stoned. He tries to defend them. He can't understand why these humans hate each other, and he just wants them to stop fighting. And he succeeds.
Why kill each other? If you're going to kill someone, just kill me instead! Why do you have to do this? Why do you hate each other? Wait, seriously?
People realize they were wrong to get so caught up in distrust that they would do something like this. The scene ultimately shows that Crybaby Ryo can't snuff out all the good of humanity. Call it a cheesy scene if you want, but I think there's something beautiful about that. Of course, Akira ultimately isn't able to save humanity, and the show ends in essentially the same way the manga does. But, with the time loop implied by the ending, there is slightly more of a spark of hope that if humanity rises again in a time loop, they could be saved from repeating this fate. Of course, that is just my hopeful interpretation of this ending. But that's the interesting thing about there being multiple versions of Devilman. There are so many ways you can interpret the story, and I'm not even just talking about the original manga and Crybaby series. There are other versions of Devilman that are great as well, but that I didn't have time to talk about in as much depth in this video. For example, there are some old Devilman OVAs, and the Devilman manga Grimoire series, which I've only read the first few volumes of, but I must say I really enjoy so far. But ultimately, this makes Devilman a fascinating series to me, and I love seeing the different ways that people and artists who work on Devilman projects interpret the characters and story in their own way. Ultimately, if I had to choose one version over the other, I would probably pick Crybaby by just a little. While the manga enhances tension by making the reader have to sit with the insane things happening in the story a little longer, I thought the way the music and animation enhanced the emotions of the story were something that greatly improved my experience. I also feel that the time travel arc of the Devilman manga, which for the most part I did not enjoy very much, really brought the manga series down a fair bit. Also, I like that Devilman Crybaby seems to be the slightly more optimistic story, at least in my interpretation. But ultimately, they are both great experiences, which are both worthwhile and great in their own ways. I would give the Devilman manga a strong 8 out of 10, and I would give the Crybaby anime a solid 10 out of 10. This does not mean that the Crybaby anime is perfect. It is far from perfect. But it's still one of the most emotional and incredible experiences I've had with an anime. Both the manga and the Crybaby anime were incredible experiences, and I had a great time with both of them. And at the end of the day, I would recommend checking out both if you have the time. Anyway, that's all I have to say for this video. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.
Are those tits? Well, Oh. Oh my god. Sweet. I'm gonna kill you! Devil chop! Devil kick! Devil beam!